The Socratic method is not a technique, it's a way of life. Imagine a man in the streets of ancient Athens, humble in appearance but striking in speech, someone who stopped strangers and friends alike to ask questions that pierced the soul. This was Socrates. He didn't deliver truths wrapped in gold. Instead, he unearthed the confusion, the doubt, the aporia, the moment when you realize you don't know what you thought you knew. He would ask, "What is justice? What is courage? What is virtue?" And when someone answered confidently, he would listen patiently, only to ask again, "But what do you mean by that?" Step by step, layer by layer, Socrates unraveled assumptions, leading his interlocutors into a state of perplexity. And this state of aporia, is where the search for truth begins. One might ask, why this relentless questioning? Why not simply provide answers? But Socrates believed that wisdom begins with acknowledging ignorance. "I know that I know nothing," he famously said. It wasn't a statement of defeat, it was liberation. To admit ignorance is to open the door to knowledge. Take the case of Meno, a young aristocrat who approached Socrates with what seemed like a simple question. Can virtue be taught? Socrates didn't answer outright. Instead, he guided Meno into dialogue, showing that before understanding whether virtue can be taught, one must first understand what virtue is. Meno, like many others, became frustrated. But Socrates wasn't trying to frustrate, he was trying to awaken. His method, maiutics, literally midwifery, was about helping others give birth to their own understanding. He didn't claim to teach, but to assist in uncovering the truth that lay dormant within. Virtue, for Socrates, was the highest aim, the true mark of a good life. He didn't see it as a distant ideal reserved for the gods or the elite, but as something attainable through self-reflection and dialogue. An unexamined life is not worth living, he declared during his trial. These were not just words, but a challenge. A call to every individual to confront their assumptions, question their beliefs, and strive for a life guided by reason and virtue. Think of the world today. Voices shouting over each other, arguments filled with certainties, but devoid of curiosity. What would Socrates say to us now? Perhaps he'd remind us of the importance of dialogue, not as a battleground for egos, but as a collaborative journey toward understanding. But Socratic dialogue isn't easy. It demands humility. It requires the courage to admit, "I don't know." It requires the patience to seek answers together. Yet, in this lies its transformative power. Imagine standing face to face with Socrates. His gaze, piercing yet calm, invites you to speak, to explain yourself. Perhaps you try to impress him with what you think you know. Perhaps you talk about justice, claiming it is giving everyone what they deserve. Socrates would nod, seeming to agree, only to ask, "But what does one deserve? And by whose standard?" This was his genius, not to destroy, but to rebuild. He didn't shatter ideas to leave ruins. He did it so that what you reconstructed afterward stood stronger, clearer, more aligned with truth. In this process, the dialogue often felt like a battle, but it was a battle fought with care and mutual respect. Even as Socrates reduced his opponents to aporia, they often left transformed, their minds alight with new possibilities. But why this insistence on dialogue? Why this faith in the spoken word? For Socrates, dialogue was more than communication. It was a living act of creation. When two minds meet honestly, without the pretense of knowing everything, something miraculous happens. They transcend themselves. It's as if truth isn't something you find alone, but something that emerges between people in the space of mutual questioning and listening. Take his relationship with Plato. Plato, the young, sharp-witted observer, watched Socrates engage the masses. Through Socratic dialogue, Plato witnessed how philosophy came alive, how ideas danced and collided. It's no wonder that when Socrates died, Plato immortalized him in dialogues that still inspire us today. And then there's maiutics. What a beautiful metaphor. A midwife. Socrates didn't believe in stuffing people with knowledge. He saw himself as someone helping others birth their own truths. But here's the catch. Birthing isn't painless. There's labor, struggle, and sometimes even tears. The discomfort of confronting your ignorance is the price you pay for genuine insight. This discomfort is what makes Aporia so profound. Today, we shy away from discomfort. We chase after easy answers, quick solutions, sound bites that make us feel smart without requiring us to think. Socrates would urge us to embrace discomfort, to lean into it, because it's in those moments of unease that we grow. Consider how Socrates met his end, not through failure, but through fidelity to his ideals. Accused of corrupting the youth and rejecting the gods of Athens, he was sentenced to drink hemlock. Yet, even in his final moments, Socrates remained Socratic. As his friends begged him to escape, he calmly explained that to flee would betray the very principles he had lived by. His life and death were one seamless act of integrity. When he drank the poison, it wasn't just a man dying, it was a philosophy taking root. Socrates taught us that a life of virtue and reason isn't just an intellectual exercise, it's a way of being, a commitment to living authentically, even in the face of injustice or death. But how do we apply this today? The Socratic method isn't confined to the dusty pages of philosophy. It's a practice we can all adopt. The next time you find yourself in a heated debate, stop. Ask a question instead of making a statement. Listen with genuine curiosity instead of formulating your rebuttal. Watch as the conversation transforms from an argument into a dialogue, from a clash of egos into a meeting of minds. And remember, Aporia isn't failure, it's progress. When you reach that point where you think, I don't know, don't despair. Celebrate it. You're standing where Socrates stood, at the edge of the unknown, ready to take the next step toward understanding. Now, let's talk about virtue. For Socrates, virtue wasn't a set of rules or a checklist of good deeds. It was a state of being, a harmony between one's actions and one's understanding of the good. And this understanding wasn't static, it was dynamic, ever deepening through dialogue and self-reflection. In a world obsessed with productivity, we often forget to ask, what's the point of it all? Socrates reminds us that the ultimate aim isn't to do more, but to be better. To live a life aligned with truth, justice, and virtue, not as abstract ideals, but as daily practices. So here's the challenge Socrates leaves us with: to live examined lives, to question not just what we do, but why we do it, to seek not just success, but significance, to engage not just in small talk, but in the kind of conversations that light up the soul. He believed this wasn't just the philosopher's duty, but everyone's. Because philosophy, at its heart, isn't about grand theories. It's about living wisely, fully, authentically. It's about finding the courage to ask, what is the good life? And the humility to admit, I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. Socrates, in his relentless questioning, didn't just challenge Athens. He challenges us, here and now, to rise above the noise, to embrace the Aporia, and to embark on our own search for truth. And perhaps, just perhaps, we'll find that the journey itself is the answer.